Renu.
Hello, Declan. Good to be back.
Nice to be back in the studio. We've posted a bunch of various content from around the place the last few weeks. We haven't done one from the studio for
it's been a little while,
3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah. And I think one thing we love to do is catch up with other podcasters.
Yes.
And I think as GUcast, we have a fairly simple name. Yeah. Your Amigos is a great name, but today's podcaster is a fantastic name.
The name is great. It's the Penis Project. That's what we're very excited to speak to today.
It's the lady behind the Penis Project podcast.
Shall we do that? Shall we go straight over to Perth and introduce Melissa Hadley-Barrett, fellow podcaster, but also fellow practitioner working in the very important area of sexual health after, well, I'm not sure, is it only after prostate cancer? Melissa will tell us all that. But yeah, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks heaps for having me.
Good to see you, Melissa. You have such an interesting story. How long have you been doing this podcast for?
This September the 14th will be the 4th year. I started it originally with Dr. Joe Milios, who's a physiotherapist that you've probably heard of. Yeah, who specialises in men's health. And we did it together for 2 years. And then after that, she just got busy doing other things. And I've just learned so much from the people I interview that I've really enjoyed it. So I really wanted to keep it going. The reason we called it the Penis Project.
That was my next question. Yeah. Very good, Melissa.
Is because, first of all, we sort of think projects was something that men are into. They're into doing projects. And at the time, there wasn't another podcast that we could find anywhere in the world that had the word penis in it. So we sort of thought that might just attract a bit of attention. And because our audience is really the community, lay people, that we thought that would gain a bit of traction. And it did. I think people went there out of curiosity and then fortunately stayed. So, it seems to have worked. And the logo, you'll notice, is nuts and a hammer. My daughter was like 20 at the time, and she drew that for me. Because I said I wanted her to draw a sausage and 2 eggs or 2 tomatoes. And she was like, no, that's so obvious, Mum. I'm going to do a nail and nuts because it's like you nailed it and you've got nuts. So
she's very clever, your daughter. And actually, when you visit your website, I love the little spiel where it says, well, who is this for? It's for anyone who has a penis.
That's right.
Anyone who knows someone with a penis or anyone who wants to have a penis.
Yeah, that was me because, I've always had a bit of penis envy. You drive along and you pull over and your son jumps out and wheezes on a tree and everyone else has to hide behind one. And I just thought, that would be amazing to have something that was so useful. So,
Oh, gosh.
So, and why are we interested in talking to Melissa then?
Well, I mean, I think I think it's part of normalising these conversations.
Yeah.
And it's a place where anyone can go for more information, lots of support.
Well, patients, and exactly. I think our GUcast audience go there as well.
That's right.
But specifically for us, I suppose, Melissa, as I say, as you know, a lot of my patients actually not just support the Penis Project, but see you as a practitioner because you're a practitioner working in sexual health. But a lot of my patients rant and rave about the Penis Project because these are mostly men who have got prostate cancer. They've been through treatment for prostate cancer. They're having some of the side effects of treatment for prostate cancer. So they're looking for resources to support them, Renu. And we're always trying to find additional resources, not just the medical-y stuff, not just taking drugs and not just vacuum erection devices, although that's very important because it doesn't get talked about enough, but other resources to support men in this journey after prostate cancer treatment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. And that podcast that we did with Victoria was very popular. Yeah. And, she came out with a bag of tricks and it was, and you're right, it's not really clinical, is it? It's a much more holistic approach to addressing these issues.
And Melissa, you've said that it covers all, but our type of patient that we've spoken about, that must be a significant proportion of the men and their loved ones that you're trying to support with the Penis Project.
Yeah, so in our clinic, we see probably 2/3 of our patients are either prostate cancer or bladder cancer rehab. And then the other third we do see a lot of Peyronie's disease and a lot of premature ejaculation, porn addiction and other things. But that would only be probably 1/3 of it. The prostate cancer was really the reason I became a sexologist because I don't know if you've ever heard my story before, but basically I was a remote area nurse for 15 years and a midwife. And then I went into private practice in a GP for 5 years. And in that time, I was the only female practitioner. So heaps of people would come in and want to talk to me about their sex problems. And then one day in particular, a lady came in who had been a very senior nurse when I was a junior nurse in emergency department. And at that time, I was early 20s and she was in her 40s, and she used to come to work and talk about her amazing sex life on night shift. And I used to be a bit disgusted that such an old woman was still having sex. And then years later, she came into my clinic for a pap smear or a cervical screen, and she had a very dry vagina, painful. And I asked her about it. I was like, she was in her 60s and I was now in my 40s. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, I remember you being really sexual. And she burst into tears and said her husband had his prostate out. He was depressed. Their relationship had completely broken down and they'd had no help with what came after. And I think because he was 61 at the time, people just assumed that maybe he was too old for sex. Maybe he had a young doctor or nurses or whatever who thought you were too old then. So I didn't know anything about this, and I was living in 500 kilometres away from Perth, and I rang up someone who I knew worked in this field and said to him, Dr. Stephen Adams, I need some help. I really want to help this couple. And then I did. And then from there, I was like, this is really interesting and nobody's really doing it. And I was living in a town with 20,000 people at the time, and they spoke to other people. And then I ended up going from being a very generalist to basically seeing sex problems. And then one day I went home and I said to my husband, I'm going to go back to uni and I want to study to be a sexologist so I can understand the psychology behind this more, which he thought was great because it's way cooler apparently being married to a sexologist than a nurse. And I was kind of fortunate, I think, because I'm a nurse practitioner, I can prescribe and diagnose, which is different to regular nursing. And so that with the psychology, sexology background meant that we could do a lot more. Yeah. And so my thing is, I really think it's important to help men keep physically healthy. And particularly like in the 9 years I've been working in this field, I've seen such an improvement in medical treatments. People are living longer. They're getting their erections back more often. People are talking more openly about sex now, so they're not embarrassed to say that they want it. Those international guidelines came out in 2022 that Victoria and I were both peer reviewers on. And, saying that, people deserve quality of life as well. Like, you guys are so good at getting rid of cancer. I think it's really important that there's also a place for them to still return to normal life. And really that was what drove me initially. So whilst I still see lots of other problems, the prostate and bladder cancer rehab is really my passion, I think.
Wow, what a great story.
It is a great story, and you clearly are extremely motivated to look after these patients. Yeah. And I suppose there's traditional medical/nursing approaches to this through clinics and all that. But what do you think makes the Penis Project itself, the podcast and your website and other stuff that goes with it, different? I mean, I can make a few comments. It certainly it expands the potential pool of patients and loved ones who might benefit, and also I think some patients and loved ones also feel more comfortable or confident going through a website or listening to a podcast or having online versus physically turning up in a clinic somewhere. But yeah, what is it about the Penis Project you think is valuable for these patients?
I really think it's about people having the experience of other people. So, when Joe and I first started this, it was during COVID times, and we were chatting one day in the corridor, and I had a few patients that were happy to talk to other people, and I would felt like I was always calling on them. A guy had come in who was really nervous about his upcoming surgery or his radiation or whatever, and I'd say, oh, John will talk to you, give him a call, or I'll get John to call you. But then I felt like the busier we got, the more I was calling on those few people. So I started to think, if we got guys to speak, have I lost you?
No,
No, we got you. Yeah, all good.
Sorry, I can only see myself now, not you guys.
Oh, that's all right.
Sorry. It's off-putting just seeing yourself. So, yeah, and I just thought we were talking about it, and I was like, if we could record these people, I'd only just started listening to podcasts myself then. I was like, lots of guys could listen to this and know, because I think it's all very well for me to say, go home and use a pump and check out Victoria's website. And, I mean, she's got amazing resources, and I always send people there. And there's quite a few practitioners that I'll send people to. But it's different hearing it from a health professional and hearing it from your peer group. So I think knowing that, Joe Bloggs down the road, who's roughly the same age as me, that's been through this 6 months ago, and this is where he's at now, makes a real difference. I always say to patients, I don't have a penis. I am never going to fully understand how you feel. And I mean, most of the urologists in Perth, as far as I know, still have their prostate. So I think it's nice for them to get that lived experience. And we also interview female and male partners. And I think that's really overlooked. Like I often see the partner on their own because they're struggling with it, you know. And probably the saddest thing I see in prostate cancer consults is the female or the male partner of the person who's been diagnosed will say, oh, I don't care if we ever have sex again. It's fine. I just want you to be alive. But that person's face drops because what they hear is, well, they're relieved they never have to have sex again. But I think the partner is trying to be kind, but isn't. And so I think being able to facilitate that conversation of, well, is that what you really mean? Or would you, in an ideal world, you can have both maybe. So let's try and have that to aim for. Like, I think that's really important to cover that mental health aspect of how important it is for us to be connected and intimate with another person.
Absolutely. Melissa, and how do you get your ideas for each episode of the podcast? Because you release an episode every couple of weeks, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is it from your experiences in your practice? Is that how you decide what your next topic should be? Is it something that's topical? Is it something that maybe a patient has raised? How do you get your ideas?
A bit of all of those things. Often I'll meet a patient who's really, really interesting. So recently I had a patient who is 72 and he'd just been diagnosed and he had his prostate out and he came in with his wife actually, and he just seemed like your average guy. And then an hour into his first consult, his wife said, are you going to tell her? And he was like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, I suppose. And he came out with it. 3 years before that, he'd started cross-dressing. And he'd never done anything like that before. And he has this whole alter ego and he dresses up as a woman and he has an online presence as this person. And it was really bothering him. He'd found this whole new side to himself that he didn't want to lose because of this. And so we had a really good chat about that. So I said, you know, often I'll meet someone like that and their story just is really interesting. So I'm going to interview him soon. Or I might meet a guy who's had a really normal recovery and it's great to interview them, or someone who's been really quick or really slow and has overcome incontinence or had an AUS put in or has climacturia and how we've used what different techniques. So it's usually just things that spark my interest that I think, oh, lots of people ask about that. So we'll talk about it. And then often people will, like I always say at the end of an episode, if you've got something you want to share, you know, just contact me, and we get emails all the time. I've got a story I want to share. So it's a bit of both. Or I'll meet a health professional somewhere and think, oh, this person, you know, my audience would really gain from listening to those people. So, yeah, it's a bit of everything, really.
Such a fantastic resource, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think we've found, so we're about the same age in podcasting years as Melissa. Actually, we're 4.5 years old as well. And so we have a back catalogue. And what I've found quite helpful is being able to refer back to episodes to say, well, this is when we talked about Gleason 6 being renamed, or this is when we spoke about transperineal versus transrectal biopsy, or this is when we had Victoria on talking about a touchy subject. By the way, Melissa, when we're talking about Victoria, it's Victoria Cullen from the A Touchy Subject website, who was on a couple of months ago. Really, really cracking episode, and we'll put that link in the show notes as well. So I'm sure you're the same. I'm sure you'll be able to say that in your practice as a sexologist, to say, well, actually, we had a podcast about this back in 2023. You might find helpful. Yeah. Do you do that, or are you organized enough to say, well, here's my 5 podcasts I recommend for your circumstance?
Yeah, definitely. And also, we try to avoid using like the surgeon or the radio oncologist's name in the podcast, but I keep a record of who those people have been to. And then when I meet someone who's I've interviewed you before, Declan, and if I meet someone who I know is about to have surgery with you and they've booked an online consult with me, I'll say, unfortunately, I was not very good at the sound in the early days, so it didn't sound very good and I have to apologise. But I'll say, well, if you go back to this episode, you can actually hear your surgeon being interviewed by us. Yeah, or if you go to episode 163, then I met a guy today and I was like, 163 had his surgery by this surgeon. So I think that really helps as well, you know, or because I try and, you know, I've got like a table, which is age of the patient, and the name of the surgeon or what procedure they had done. And then I'll always, at the end of a consult, email them, because there's, 170 something podcasts now. So I'll be like, go to these ones first and start off, because they're most about what you are, and then you can go from there.
And when you started out, Melissa, you mentioned that there was no one else really that was doing anything in this sort of field. And in the last 4 years, Victoria Cullen's one example, have you come across others, and have there been collaborations?
I've come across a lot of physiotherapists in Canada and America that really want to collaborate. And so I've done a lot. I'm New Zealand as well. So Joe and I both went to the urology conference in New Zealand last year and spoke, because they invited us, because the urologists over there listen to the podcast and recommend it. And the Prostate Cancer Association of the UK recommend our podcast to the all new referrals. And so we get a lot of, that's probably why I get so many English people wanting to have online consults. But yeah, probably the people that I've collaborated with the most is pelvic floor physios, some in Wales, some in London, and a lot in Canada and US, because they're really keen just to have a bit of knowledge that they can pass on to their client. And there's also a group, I don't know if you've heard of F96. Have you heard of that?
No.
It's they're on your side of Australia. They're in Queensland, but they have quite a big online presence where they do courses for health professionals, but all for about cancer rehabilitation, different types of cancer rehabilitation. And I collaborate with them a bit. Like I'm doing they've got an online conference for people all around the world coming up soon, and I'm speaking at that, just to give other health professionals that, I feel it's really sad when I meet men. I met a guy today, he had his prostate out 10 years ago at 45 in New Zealand, and he never knew about penile rehabilitation until someone's moved in next door to him, who was my patient 5 years ago, and is like, everything's working great, and I use injections if I want an erection to last longer than 5 minutes. And this guy's like, well, how come I haven't done this, So
that's still so sad to hear that, because this is a reality, and lots of people listening to this podcast and your podcast will know of that. And it's still a crime, really, that in many countries around the world, Australia included, there is zero support for patients in this side of their recovery from prostate cancer treatment. There's zero support for any type of drugs that we use to rehabilitate patients, for vacuum erection devices, and especially for the sort of services that you and other sexologists or other nurses with an interest in this area, physios with an interest. There's no support. You have to pay for this yourself.
Pay out of pocket,
and we often complain that breast cancer gets a lot more support. I mean, all cancer survivors deserve this support, but because so many of our patients, Melissa, will be cured of their cancer, will be continent or be very happy with their continent, but so many will have significant deterioration in their sexual function. What are your thoughts on that? Have we just not lobbied well enough? Because it strikes me that the great successes we've had with cancer survivorship for these patients has not been reciprocated with supporting these men and their loved ones from the sexual health, quality of life aspect.
Yeah, I think there's two things that happen there. I think lots of health professionals are really embarrassed to bring up the subject. And I do a lot of public speaking on this for health professional conferences. And the other thing is that the patient often feels, and the research backs this up, that they've cured my cancer, I'm being selfish to want it all, or I'm being entitled to want it all. So, there's a really great cartoon where there's a guy with his, doctor with his coat on, and he's like, oh, I hope if he's worried about his function, he asks me. And the patient's like, I really hope he asks me, because neither of them want to raise the subject, pardon the pun, raise the subject. But I think it happens. I think that's really sad. So, I think it's okay. We need to get it out there to the public that, we're so good at saving people's lives now that it is okay to want it all. And I think from the breast cancer versus prostate cancer and bladder cancer, I find that really sad. And I think that's because it's pretty obvious if you've had a mastectomy. But it's a mastectomy, have your breast removed. I don't know why I can't say that today. But it's not that obvious when you've had your prostate out. Like, nobody knows. So I think a lot of these men suffer in silence. Because no one can see it. Nowadays, especially, you guys do robotic surgery. They look great within a month. No one has even known they've had cancer often. And then, so no one asks them how they are, and then they feel like they can't say how they are. And I also think that women in general are used to talking about their sexuality to their friends and going to the doctor from a young age and asking for a pap smear. And, you know, we sit around, you know, I'm in my 50s, you know, been through the menopause thing. I sit with my friends, have a couple of glasses of wine, and we talk about what's happened to our bodies. But most men don't do that. You know, they just jolly it along and make jokes about how much sex they're getting or not getting, and that's the end of it. And really they're, you know, really sad inside because it's not working and they're too embarrassed to tell their mates, even though their mates are in the same situation.
Yeah, I remember a patient of mine talking about Victoria's website, the Touchy Subject website, the YouTube website that she has. And he said that he really enjoyed reading the comments underneath. There are a lot of comments on it, like there are on GUcast videos, because he said, I'm not the sort of person who'll reach out and, you know, I'm happy with my lot in life, but it does make me feel better to read those comments and understand that I'm not alone. And again, it's a sad comment to make, but people can often find just some reassurance in hearing of other people's experience and so on.
That's right.
And it might give them the confidence then to reach out to people for support, people like Melissa and Victoria and other sexologists and nurses, physiotherapists, other sexual health practitioners out there. And that's part of the message we're trying to get out a bit today, Renu.
Yeah, and that's true, isn't it? Because a lot of people who do reach out to you, Melissa, are people who are motivated to seek some help in this area. But there's going to be so many men out there who don't know about it, or who are afraid to approach it, or, like you say, feel like they don't deserve, you know, to have good quality of life, especially after their prostate cancer's been cured. And then there's people in other countries. I mean, there are a lot of countries in which this is cultural taboo, talking about all of this, and inappropriate. And so all those men miss out.
Yeah, and I think also the saddest thing about the rehabilitation side of it is something that could be self-directed and you can do at home, which is why I started those online programs, because I thought, you know, there's a 4-month wait at the moment for me to book someone in, and I've got 4 other nurse practitioners now that work with me. And I mean, I can get people into them within 3-4 weeks, but we're really busy face to face. And I kind of found myself saying the same basic stuff often. And I thought, if I can get people at, you know, cheaper than they would pay for a consult to start off using a pump, understand what's gone wrong with their erections, understand how long it's going to take for them to heal, you know, convince them that, you know, using a penis pump isn't some kinky, weird toy that you only see on Meet the Fockers, you know, like normalising it, and they can get started. By the time we can actually see them and maybe they need a prescription or they might need help with injections or whatever, we're really talking about what's happening for them instead of giving them all this generic information so we can help more people. And I think that's what the podcast does too. When you get on and you hear 170 guys that are probably using one of Victoria's pumps and doing it, it's like, wow, I'm not so weird after all. Like, it's okay that I want to do these things. I actually interviewed Victoria yesterday. Victoria and I interviewed a patient that we share yesterday, and that episode will be coming out in a couple of weeks. And it was really great to hear the different things he got from his interaction with her and us, you know, like it was complementary but different. And I also think, I'm sure you guys talked to Victoria about this, but she's got this hub at the moment that she's just started where men can go in and it's a private forum and they can have an alias and they talk to each other. And the guy that we were talking to yesterday was just saying how great it's been to be in a safe group where he can learn from other people in the same situation as him.
Wow. Aren't they doing amazing work? So let's wrap it up by then we'll put them in the show notes by just pointing people towards some of these great resources. Podcast, yes, Penis Project, just search it. It's everywhere. Follow it. Give it 5 stars. Give it a great rating.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think I've given it a rating, or maybe I did back when I was interviewed, but I'm definitely going to do that. But Penis Project, if you're listening to GUcast, I reckon you should be listening to Penis Project, because you're going to learn something from it, and point your patients towards it if you're a health practitioner as well.
Yeah.
A Touchy Subject, Victoria's website. Just Google A Touchy Subject and follow her and Melissa on all your socials, because you constantly get pointed towards other resources like this new hub, I suppose, and Victoria's amazing videos and so on. And then for patients who want to reach out directly for support for you and your team, Melissa, you can find it through the Penis Project, or how can people search? Because apart from your face-to-face, you do online consultations for people all over the place. So let us know how people can reach out.
Yeah, so I'll send you all the links, but I have one website, which is melissahadley-barrett.com, which is how people can either look at the programs and then they can book a one-on-one consult. And then my face-to-face clinic, and you can also book Zoom consults through that if you're in Australia or New Zealand, is rshealth.com.au. So either of those options. And we have Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube channel and all that stuff as well. So there's heaps of resources and information on both of those websites that people can find.
You can't miss it, the Penis Project.
Well, exactly. And a bunch of my patients are already patients of Melissa's as well that we share. And I suspect there'll be many more as time goes by. And
I'm sure there will be, yeah.
We're just really pleased you came and joined us so we can raise the visibility of these great resources. And congrats to you personally for putting this on. And I know you love collaborating with people like Victoria, physios like Joe and others around the place. So yeah, keep up the great work.
Keep up the great work, yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here. So I always listen. I learn a lot from here. I feel like I learn from my patients what happens in the real world, and then I learn from you guys what's happening in the medical world. So it's good.
Fantastic.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Melissa. That was fantastic, wasn't it?
Really good. She's obviously very passionate about it, Melissa.
And it's a really professional sounding and looking podcast. And wherever you are in the world, just search for Penis Project and search for Melissa Hadley-Barrett and Co. Search for Victoria Cullen. These are all great resources for patients and their loved ones who've been through the prostate cancer, bladder cancer journey, or maybe even people out there, how did you say at the start, who have a penis, who know somebody with a penis, who want to have a penis. Yeah, that's
penis
all for you.
It's all there. But, I think the best thing is it's so patient focused. So it's really about other people's similar experiences.
It sure is. That's all we got time for on this episode of GUcast. We'll be back soon with some more great content and stay in touch.